We label and reference specific pitches alphabetically in music. If we want to reference the distance between pitches, we use a numerical system. This is based on the major scale. Remember, our major scale goes whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. The first note of the major scale is called 1. The next 2, the next 3, etc., etc. Now if I want to reference the distance of 2 whole steps and a half step, I have the ability to just say a fourth, which is a little more efficient than saying 2 whole steps and a half step. 3 whole steps and a half step would be a fifth. So again, I can identify that general distance. This is another reason why understanding the major scale is super important, because even intervals which are not in the major scale are identified as altered major scale intervals. More on that later. I can now identify general pitch relationships like the major triad. The major triad is defined as the first, third, and fifth of the major scale. The C major scale, we'll remember, goes C, up a whole step to D, up a whole step to E, up a half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C. A major scale, A, B, whole step to C sharp, half step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp, whole step to G sharp, half step takes us back to A. A G major scale, G, up a whole step to A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, back to G. An E major scale, E, up a whole step to F sharp, whole step to G sharp, half step to A, whole step to B, whole step to C sharp, whole step to D sharp, half step takes you back to E. D major scale, D, up a whole step to E, up a whole step to F sharp, up a half step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, whole step to C sharp, half step takes you back to D. So my C major triad would specifically be C, E, and G, the first, third, and fifth of that scale. My A major triad, A, C sharp, and E. My G major triad, G, B, D. My E major triad, E, G sharp, B. And my D major triad, D, F sharp, and A. And it would be the same for all the other major scales as well. These are just 5 examples that are convenient for this guitar lesson. So when I reference G major as a chord, it should be understood that this is a more convenient way of saying the grouping together of the first, third, and fifth of the G major scale, or the grouping together of G, B, and D. Next, we'll locate the pitches of one of these triads on the first 3 frets of the guitar. At the top, we have the name of the triad. Below, in parentheses, we have the specific pitches of that triad. Again, the first, third, and fifth of the E major scale. Next, we're going to plot out those pitches on the neck of the guitar in first position, on the first 3 frets. We start on the open string, which is E, and we mark that because it's one of the pitches in our triad. We go up a half step from E to F, from F to F sharp, from F sharp to G. Go to the next open string, which is an open A, up a half step to A sharp, up a half step to B, and we label that as it's one of the pitches in the triad. B up a half step to C. Next open string takes you to D, up a half step to D sharp, up another half step to E. Up a half step from E to F. Next string, open G, first fret gives us G sharp, up a half step from G sharp to A, up a half step from A to A sharp. Next open string gives us B. Up a half step from B to C, up a half step to C sharp, up a half step to D. Next open string gives us an E. We go up a half step to F, F sharp, and G, and we're done. And son of a gun if that doesn't look like an E chord. Next, let's try G major. Again, name of the triad on top, the specific pitches within that triad below it, the first, third, and fifth of the G major scale. We start on the open E string, move up a half step to F, F sharp, and label the G on the 3rd fret. Next open string is A, up a half step to A sharp, up a half step to B, which is the 3rd of our triad, up a half step from B to C. Next open string is D, up a half step to D sharp, up a half step to E, up a half step to F. Next open string is G, that's our 1st again, up a half step to G sharp, up a half step to A, up a half step to A sharp. Next open string is B, up a half step to C, up a half step to C sharp, up another half step to D. Next open string is E, up a half step to F, up a half step to F sharp, another half step takes you to G. You'll notice it's impossible to play all of these pitches at the same time. You have 2 different pitches on the same string. Regardless of which one you choose to play, you're still playing a G chord because whichever note's being not played was being picked up at a different octave. So with all of these chord forms, they necessarily get pared down to something that's more practical to play. Bear in mind you need only a single 1-3-5 for a major triad. Additional octaves are redundancies which do add weight to the chord but are not necessary. As an exercise, repeat this with triads C, A, and D for a better understanding of where major triads come from, as well as our guitar chord forms.